Hello. I have a few announcements before we get to the slides. And the first one is, if you didn't see, if you tried to find after 8 p.m. Friday or earlier than 8 p.m. on Saturday, the lecture posted from that week on YouTube, you wouldn't have seen it because I was quite ill, and that's worrisome. But these days, you never know why. But I think I've figured it out. I'm better now, but I'm not completely recovered. I think it was something I ate at the faculty event where I was one of the guests of honor. Honestly stated, I'm not exaggerating, because I wrote the text for the Maybeck Memorial that's been posted for the first time. Bernard Maybeck, who started green design, created the idea, one of the first architects to discover the concept of building with nature and integrating a building with its site and using natural materials. All these principles that now architects tout as brand new and green design, they call it. He's the first one in the 1890s, and he taught at UC Berkeley. And his first student, among his first students, was Julia Morgan, America's first independent female architect, both of whom I've written books about, as you may know from my mentioning at the beginning of the semester. The point is that I think I ate something at that event, or otherwise somehow something maybe after that, where I had a horrible night. Friday, 3 a.m., acid reflux and whatever. I couldn't sleep, so I just wasn't able to do anything on the work end of my obligations. I needed to take care of my health, so I did post those lectures. I think it's 3 lectures every week that I give on Zoom, obviously including the one for this class from last week about 7 p.m. or something. I brought my laptop to my sick bed so I could do it there. And I just started feeling a little better yesterday. And then today I'm not feeling my best, but hey, we're on Zoom, so it isn't going to affect any of you unless I get so tired I pass out, in which case it's not a heart attack. My daughter told me to tell you that. That's not an issue here. I doubt it's going to happen. I'm sure we'll get through, because it's really important not to leave class at the break or early at all, because the second half will be when we review for the midterm, which will be the Monday after spring break. So it'll be your chance to ask questions. And my commitment to you is to reduce the study list by at least a third. Thanks. Yeah. Well, in any case, what we're doing is what you need to know, everything you need to know about what to study, what not to study, how the test is going to be presented, and how to, send it to me, all of that. We'll do that after the break. But first, I also wanted to mention that I'm pretty sure that by late April, I'll know for sure by then, we can do a walking tour of historic buildings, homes, and things you wouldn't normally ever have a chance to get into. It's, of course, totally optional, and it's in Berkeley on a Sunday afternoon when parking is free. And it'll be a neighborhood that you probably won't know unless you know the city of Berkeley, but one where I know the owners of these buildings, so they know me enough to trust that I'm letting in groups of people they never met, but I can vouch for all you guys. So that would be from like around 2 to 4:30, and it'll be 20 points, the most of any event or activity, I should say, for extra credit. And I'll send you an email. And that's always been highly attended. One time, if you can believe it, I had 48. There was too many people. I had to have, luckily, I hired 2 readers then as event assistants, not readers, but they had been my readers. Luckily, I thought ahead, and we needed that because you had to do every building in 2 shifts. Well, that shouldn't happen this time. My classes aren't as large. All 3 of them combined. I doubt everyone would attend, and then it might be that many. But it'll be manageable, and it'll be entertaining, interesting, enlightening, all the above. Entertaining, yeah, that's not alliteration, is it? But also worth extra credit. But you'll have to get to Berkeley on your own, and it is not an SRJC sponsored event. That's really important to make clear, because otherwise we get into legal issues. I did that for a while where I went to college, and I just decided it's not worth it, because you have to sign waivers. You guys do, and I do. And then if we go in a building, that's a public building, that they have to sign a waiver. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry, lawyers love making things more complicated, don't they? Sorry if any of you are attorneys. I have family members who are attorneys, including Tim Nader. He is the cousin of Ralph Nader. If you don't know who Ralph Nader is, you ought to. One of the most effective attorneys in the history of America. He made all the cars in this country a whole lot safer by his lawsuits against GM, Ford, and Chrysler, the big three auto producers. And I mean, he's legendary. And his nephew is my cousin, his grandnephew, I think it is. Yeah. So I'm not talking about all lawyers being, not people we should respect by all means. Someone who worked that hard, it's not easy. I know I applied to law school, got admitted, went to some classes and thought I might want to go to Golden Gate Law School. No, Hastings. I'm at Hastings. Sorry, Hastings, which is where I think Kamala Harris went. And I realized, oh no, that's too, I would have to be working, and you can't really work and go through law school and get good grades and get a good position afterwards. So anyway, so I don't mean to diss lawyers, but let's just say, let's avoid them if we can for a simple event like a walking tour. What that means is there is a fee, because I don't get paid for this since it's not through the college. And it's $20, and it's half or less. I think it's less than half of what San Francisco, Oakland, or Berkeley heritage groups charge for their walking tours, $45 a person. A and B, it's voluntary. You can still get your full 60-point extra credit through other options if you choose to. Okay, so I'll let you know more about that sometime like mid-April. Well, once I know for sure, at least 2 weeks, and it'll be one of the first, or well, it could be the third, one of the first 2 or 3 Sundays in May, obviously well before, or at least a week, if not 2 weeks before final exams week. Okay. So are there any questions you guys have about extra credit? Or, I forwarded grades to everybody that turned in their papers late from all, or both, I mean, both of my 2 online classes. But one person, well, I see you're here, Anthony, I don't have your email stored because it should have come up when I put in AD or AD, it didn't. So you must have sent it under a different email handle. So you need to if you don't mind. Go ahead.
So I send it, but I don't have an email that's set as a Dawuki.
Yeah, okay. Well, my point is it's easy to fix, to resolve a simple impasse. So you get your grade, which is for you to send me another email reminding me of this conversation. I think tonight I need to get enough sleep to completely recover from this weekend. So I may not do it tonight, but tomorrow for sure. I sent the other 2 people their grades away. The reader had compiled them, and there's an explanation on those. But 2 of the 3 people did not include cover sheets, so they got a summary, but that's what I do anyway. And if I forget who it was, it doesn't matter. I don't want to pick names out of the hat here, or out of individuals who turned in theirs late. That's everyone's option if they need to do that. It was only 5 points off. Nobody waited more than a week, so nobody had 10 points off. But that'll be noted, so you'll see how you got the total points, including the minor 5-point deduction for being less than a week late. Point is, Anthony, if you just resend me an email, and then I can hit reply, okay, and I will attach the reader's, grade summary and explanation so you can see that. Okay, and I'll do that tomorrow. All right.
Yeah, I'll resend it to you.
Well, and then I'll probably be stored. Yeah, my laptop and my mainframe, I call it, they don't always have the same. In fact, there's none of my teaching handout files are on this laptop. I don't have room for them because as it is, I'm barely going to be able to record this, store it, and then forward everything before I remember. It's a lot to keep track of, at least for someone like me who isn't high-tech oriented and never was before the pandemic. Ever thought I'd dream in my wildest dreams I'd be teaching most of my classes online. I thought, no way. But point is that I can't always send you guys, if you have a request for anything that is a PDF, through my laptop. So some days I check both, but not every day, because the days when I'm teaching, I'm on my laptop in my house and I have back-to-back classes, and that's Mondays and Wednesdays. So if you don't hear from me, just don't worry too much in 24 hours. But if it's a question, I can answer, of course, by email. I can check my email, of course, on any device. But if it's a request for something to be forwarded to you, like returned paper or a handout you lost or whatever, deleted accidentally, then you might have to wait 2 days or so for me to get to the mainframe on the days when I'm in my studio and not teaching. Okay, it's kind of a detail, but it could be something some of you might have noticed. I don't always get back as quickly as some of you might expect, or as I have in the past, to the same persons because of that glitch or whatever limitation of I have a very old laptop. It weighs about 10 pounds. Not quite, but it's pretty heavy. So it was a gift from my now onto the wafer thin modern style that my I can't remember, it was my wife or my daughter that had this old one and said, oh, well, you're going to need one. So here you go, have this one. Which was just in time to make the transition, as you would call, when we had to shut everything down. Hey, we passed our second anniversary, Friday the 13th. I'll never forget. I picked my daughter up from her high school, Albany High, and she had a look on her face like, this is going to be a long, and then she would the word ASS break. It ain't spring break alone. I thought, well, of course you got 10 days. So no, I'm telling you, we're going to be out of classes probably through the end of my senior year. And I thought, no way. Probably the end of this school year. Well, she never even got her graduation. We've survived, and I think hopefully we're wiser and stronger for that, most of us. Hopefully all of you are. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the slides, because our first task is to finish Roman art, but you're going to have to bear with me. My addled brain over the weekend, and the fact that when I last showed these slides a week ago, last Monday night, I didn't make a note, as I often do at the end of the lecture, on the last slide I showed. So I don't remember. I know it's not that many left of the must-know slides I'm talking about from the syllabus that I still have to finish, which we'll do first. And then I want you to just relax and enjoy seeing my own slides. And you'll have to take notes, of course, for my trip to Rome. I don't think we got that far, but if anybody wants to do this, here's what I'm going to do. I'm starting out with what I'm guessing, totally, it's a wild guess, might or might not be, right? Whoops, let's see, what have I got here now? All right, where are we here? Oh, return to meeting. Okay, sorry. Come on, return to meeting. I've never had to do this. It just jumped 2 screens. Can people see me?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
I thought that it jumped me out
Yes.
because it said return to meeting, which is never done before, because I would never stop a meeting, at least deliberately or consciously. Okay, so we are going to have to, here's the point. When you see the first slide, I may have to go all the way back out, but I hope it won't do that again. That's a new little glitch. That there's always new ones that come up with any kind of high-tech system, of course. Okay, let's see if, oh, good, it's still on here. Now, what I can't figure out here is why I'm, okay, let's go to the full screen. Why it's not letting me. I think I have to go back out. All right, but let's not waste too much time. I apologize for what time we will have to be down for my reformatting, I guess it is. I don't know what it's doing, frankly. It's new to me. To get back to a slide where we finished. What was the last slide? In other words, I showed you guys on Monday. I can't remember. I know it was after the Coliseum and the Pantheon, right? We got that far, didn't we?
Yeah, as far as mine, it's the Pantheon. What about everyone else?
That would make sense, because then that's what slide I was going to pull up, but somehow it just won't go on the screen. So I think it's because I put it on too early. Sometimes it does that. You know, if you do it more than 20, 30 minutes before the Zoom session, it won't, it'll glitch. So let's try it this way. Okay. And then I'll have to go back. I know how to. We've done this before. When I was going to have to do it when I show you my own slides anyway, which of course will be after we finish the must knows. Okay, so here's the selection, and that would mean the first one would be this one. And now let's get this down to where we can let's get rid of these. Yeah, that's it. That's what we need to get rid of. Yeah, there's all the stuff lined up behind it and not the actual. I think we're going to be okay. We hit screen share. Okay, let's try again. All right. And I'm going to minimize this and maximize this. I hope it's working. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. We didn't cover this, did we? I don't think so. It's the Arch of Titus, correct? We still need to do it. Yeah, because it's one I probably won't cut from the study list. We're going to do that, though, after the break. So remember, don't, disappear during or right after the break, because you'll miss, a very valuable overview of how the test is going to be given and what is or isn't going to be possibly on it. All right, so this is the Arch of Titus, Titus. He was a Roman emperor. Rome, of course, the location in 81 AD is the date, or CE. Okay, so Titus was the emperor who, when he was a general, so before he was emperor, he was the one who defeated the rebellion of the Jews in what's now Israel. Was Israel then too? They called it the province of Israel under Roman rule. The Jews rebelled, in other words, against the Romans, and like all the rebellions that they won, the Romans not only crushed the rebellion, they expelled the population from what was then the province of Israel, which had been an independent kingdom for 13 centuries before the Romans took it over. It's not a minor detail. This is affecting the world to this day, not just the Middle East, but us and Europe and even other parts of the world. In other words, you're going to see the proof, and I'll wait till I show you a slide of the interior here, that detail, as to why I say the event that this monument commemorates is still echoing throughout world politics today, to this very day, 2,000 years later, and that's not an overstatement. But first of all, what is this structure? It's a triumphal arch, and you see that's on your list of terms to know, right? Triumphal arches. So triumphal arches, well, I should have made it plural. Shouldn't. I should make it singular. So just cross out the S. Okay, a triumphal arch, what is that? Here we go. A large stone monument with an archway built by the Romans. A large stone monument with an archway built by the Romans, comma, to commemorate a military victory, comma, sorry, it's a long definition, beneath which the soldiers who won that victory would march, period. A large stone monument with an archway built by the Romans to commemorate a military victory, comma, beneath which the soldiers who won that victory would march. Well, that's what this is. It's a victory to the, a monument to the victory of the Roman army over the Jews when they crushed the Jewish rebellion. Actually, it's more specific than that. It commemorates the fall of Jerusalem. And you don't need to know even history to know that was the capital of ancient Israel. So Jerusalem was destroyed. The Romans destroyed the Jewish capital, Jerusalem, the night that this depicts, that night. It's the fall of Jerusalem. The other word for it is sack. That's actually even a better word. When you sack a city, well, you're going to, oh gosh. I hope we don't see that if and when Kiev and several other Ukrainian cities that are surrounded have that terror ahead of them. Let's hope not, but whatever. It's what happens when an invading army decides that they're going to just destroy their enemies if they get control over a city. It's called sack. You probably know that word. It's in the news quite often these days, sadly, recently more than it used to be. So the Romans' sack of Jerusalem is what this commemorates. You could just say the fall of Jerusalem. It's the same thing. And so what you're going to see in the detail, if it's on the exam, if it's a detail, you can't see what the whole structure is. So you wouldn't see the detail. You'd see this view. Okay, so everybody's clear. This is the slide you'd see, which is a professional slide from Stockstead, I think. Okay, but this is the detail that you'd want to know if it's on. I'll explain after the break what I mean. The slide essay portion of the midterm, then you'd need to describe what this commemorates in more detail than just the fall of Jerusalem. But here you have a scene that is chilling, really. When I looked at it, it sent chills down my spine because I know exactly and knew because I studied this at Cal Berkeley, right? Art history class where the professor was very, very eloquent about what this monument commemorates. The night Jerusalem fell, literally, you're looking at that. Right here, you have life-size Roman soldiers. Now, they're not wearing armor, because they don't need to. They've already killed. Here, what they did was first they killed every male, Jewish male in Jerusalem of fighting age, those that couldn't escape. Some of them did, but most of them were trapped. Then they sold the men and women into slavery and exiled them. Men and women, sorry, I meant the women and children, sorry, the younger, under 15 or whatever age it was, considered fighting age. So the younger males were children, boys and girls, and all the women were exiled. And then they imported the Arabic tribes that lived around the edge of what was then the Kingdom of Israel into that territory. So I think you get the idea without having to get political at all. Quite literally, I can see both sides of that conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict. But the bottom line, all you have to, if it's on the exam, is to describe this detail, and what it illustrates is the night the temple, of course, that they destroyed. There's now one wall left of that temple, and that's the holiest spot on earth to Jews. Some of you know this, if you have Jewish heritage or friends, or you've read about it. I've been to Jerusalem, I think it's 3 times. And I have some friends that still live there. And of course, it's very powerful when you know what this is. But it's also, of course, the roots of that conflict that now is 2 cultures competing for the same land. And it's a very difficult problem. I don't see a solution. But it started this night, the night Jerusalem fell. And here's the proof that that's what we're looking at, because if you don't have to be Jewish to know this, but if you don't, you should write this. It's a menorah, right? One of the most sacred images in the synagogues. And the temple was a synagogue. The temple means just, in essence, the largest synagogue in Israel was the Temple of Jerusalem. It was huge. And they destroyed everything except one wall. And that's what's called the Wailing Wall. You've heard that phrase, I'm sure, in the news, if you've ever listened to any news from the Middle East. And there's often conflict to this day right there at that site. That's all that's left of the old temple. And above it are the 3 holiest mosques. We're going to talk about them. I'm sorry, the 2 oldest mosques in Islam are on the ruins of that temple. So you get the idea. They created this dynamic of a conflict between 2 groups that had existed side by side. And now, of course, after the Jews were expelled, for 18 centuries, was it? They wandered the world. It's called the phenomenon of the diaspora, right? Okay, so that where my cursive is one of the many. These were priceless. These were solid gold. They stole everything of value in sight. And the Roman soldiers are carrying that off because even the base was made of gold. It was probably one of the several large menorahs. But this object, the last thing you could mention about the meaning of this piece with the detail is, I'll give you a clue. Steven Spielberg made a movie about it. And he showed accurately that people have been searching for this object ever since the night Jerusalem fell. To this day, there's still a lot of archaeologists that wonder if it still exists. Anybody know what I'm talking about? He made a movie called something.
Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, that's it. So
Which
there
one?
you go. If you didn't hear that, Ark of the Covenant. Ark, right? Or Arch is another word for Ark of the Covenant. Venant. You don't have to worry about the spelling. Remember, of any word that is not on the syllabus. Okay, so this is the Ark of the Covenant. And what you're looking at is this giant box made of gold, which inside of it had supposedly, according to, some witnesses. So there's some evidence that it's not just a myth. In fact, we know it existed. That's not a myth. What happened to it is what we don't know. But supposedly inside of it, this is the part no one can really verify because it's too long ago, were all the pieces of the Ten Commandments, which Moses had gotten from supposedly directly from God, right? So you're going to say contain pieces of the Ten Commandment or all the broken pieces of the Ten Commandments, plural, of course, that Moses had given to the Jewish people, and they were stolen along with all the other valuable objects by Roman soldiers the night Jerusalem fell. And that's what you're looking at. It's almost like news at 11, breaking news, right? Jerusalem just fell. Let's go to our local camera crew that, Anyway, it's really, when you look at it and you know what you're looking at, it's really kind of chilling, because that is the root of the Arab Israel that night, that event that panel depicts. And those are life-size figures of Roman soldiers carrying off everything they could get their hands on from the Temple of Jerusalem. Okay, that's almost the whole meaning, except some of you can tell by looking at this. This is not original. This was added by a pope later. So the original monument ended, as most, Roman buildings and, ancient classical style, even today, the revivals of these styles, neoclassic, they call buildings, like city halls and state capitals and, any building that uses Greco or Roman, or they just say Greco-Roman classical architectural style. They all have cornice lines. It's a good word to know. I think I've mentioned it, but if not, you should write it now. The cornice line, just like it sounds, C-O-R-N-I-C-E, cornice line. It's the top of the building. That's where the original structure ends. This is added hundreds of years, 15 centuries later in the, more than that, these in the 1700s. You don't have to know when that was added. You could just say it was added in the last few hundred years by a pope. And it's not part of the original structure. All you have to analyze then, let's do that now for the formal analysis, is the structure below the cornice line. So is it balanced? Of course, it's totally symmetrical left to right. Sorry, somebody had a question. Sounds like anybody had a question? Nope. Okay. So it's balanced, symmetrical left to right. But of course, it's clearly open space down below and from the middle where the arch is. So it would therefore be unbalanced, right, toward the top. That's obviously the midline right there. So that's how balance is in this structure. For stable versus dynamic, again, some of this by now, you guys can almost do all these things on your own because you did on your papers. It's mostly stable because it's a pretty right angle, rectangular structure, except for the archway. And the, you could say the edges, you can't say corners, they don't have corners, the edges of the attached columns. Those are called engaged columns. Sounds like they're going to get married, right? Don't have to write that word, but if you're curious, there is, because it's not a real column. They don't support anything. They're just decorative, but they do have a curve. So that those are dynamic. And the victory angels up here are dynamic. Victory angels is what the Romans would have called them in Latin, of course. So you could say it's mostly stable with some dynamic details. And I just told you what those were. So then we have the cool gray color of the stone. The similar texture on the outside, it's mostly the real smooth texture of marble, except for these two victory angels. But inside, you just saw, right, is actually this panel is of Roman cavalry, horses and soldiers. But the other panel I just showed you, that's obviously got simulated textures on their clothing, their hair, and the objects that they're stealing. I mean, what else is it carrying away? That's all simulated texture on those two inner archway panels, and of course all that is done with carved line. All the line here is carved line on some of the columns, right, and all the bas-relief figures. Remember, that's not part of the original thing, so there's no carved lettering on this originally. Okay, and then the largest mass, it's one mass really, and for space, it's a 50-foot high stone monument with about a 40-foot high archway. And then the figures are life-size human figures, human and animal figures, which overlap. That's the only technique for space, is overlapping on those two bas-relief panels. And the modeling is the shadows from the sun, of course. Let's see, I think we covered everything. Oh, the rhythm should be very obvious. The columns, great rhythm, and the soldiers and horses on the inside. Okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat again the masses?
It's a single mass. Yeah, that's an easy one. There's no, you don't have to break it down. It's a one single large mass. There's
But
no smaller or second or third size.
yeah, but do you say that it's 600 what?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, the size, like 50 feet high.
Oh, that was space. Remember, with the building, it's the dimensions you would always write. Yeah, so I'll say it again. For space, it's 50 feet high, not 60. About, I'm rounding off to the nearest tens. You know, you don't have to get too detailed. About a 50-foot high structure with a 40-foot high archway, and obviously those carved soldiers overlap. That's the only technique for space. You know, just on those two panels, they overlap each other. Okay, so that's space, not mass. It's a single large mass. Okay, all right. Now, this is the next must know. And this is the column of Trijon, or Trajan, as some people pronounce it, Trajan. Again, you could guess almost every one of these kinds of monuments, whether they're an archway or a column or some other kind of, you know, public monument to a Roman military victory, was almost always the emperor who ordered it. In fact, I don't know any that didn't. I mean, the only ones, the emperor, who had the authority to have a public works project this massive. So this is again, it's called the Column of Trajan, Rome, in 113 AD or CE. It's a column for the victory to commemorate. I'm sorry, a column to commemorate. You could say celebrate, but these took years. So by the time the columns or triumphal arches, these various monuments were built by the Roman emperors, it was years after the victory. So celebration had already happened, right? But here what we have is a 130-foot tall column. I don't think I have a view of the whole thing. No, I don't. I do in my own slides, but this is the view if it's on the exam. This is the view you'd have. I'm not saying I will or won't cut it. You'll find that out when we do the review after the break. Okay, so what do we see here? We see a column erected by an emperor named Trajan or Trijon, who had a victory over and this is going to take a minute or two to explain. I don't have a, you know, whiteboard or blackboard to use for you guys here for this, so you just have to, I'll say it slowly, and if you need me to repeat part of it. It's a victory over the last province the Romans conquered. It was called Dacia. The Romans called it that, D-A-C-I-A. Pretty phonetic, with a capital D, of course. Dacia. Well, what's that? It's modern day Romania, where, like, isn't it the second largest number of refugees trying to get out with their lives? Their women and children mostly have made, you know, refuge, have taken refuge, whatever the phrase is. Yeah, after Poland, it's the second largest number of war refugees that we're seeing trying to escape Ukraine. It's the country right next to what is now the Ukraine. So it's way far from Italy. It's like almost 1,000 miles from Italy. Well, from Rome anyway. So how did the Romans happen to conquer that area that far from Italy? Because it wasn't part of their empire until the Dacians, that's who they were, right? I already spelled that word. The Dacians kept attacking the border of the Roman Empire. So Trajan decided to end that, you know, kind of nuisance, I guess you could call it, or aggravation or threat. I mean, it wasn't a threat to the empire, but they were, you know, raiding towns along the edge of the Roman Empire, along the border of you know, the eastern border of Roman Empire. So Trajan said enough, and he sent several legions, you know, just say thousands, you know, say, keep it simple, thousands of Roman soldiers into Dacia, defeated them in battle. But the first time he gave them a chance to just swear allegiance to Rome if they wouldn't attack again, and he withdrew his soldiers. This is what's, you know, unfortunate for the Dacians. They didn't learn from history. I guess they maybe had no written language. I don't know, but they didn't learn what the Romans do if you don't accept their conquest of your province. What I just told you what they did to the Jews, right? So when they then rebelled a second time, in other words, and kicked the Roman guards out, Trajan came back with a bigger army and he wiped out all of them were killed, except maybe some of the I guess some women and younger children were spared, but they were sent into slavery, of course, therefore exiled. So it was an empty province that was created by the Romans by their destruction of the Dacian kingdom after the second invasion. That's what this monument depicts. And it shows 5,000 Roman soldiers. Can you believe that many? 5,000 figures are carved on this. I'll repeat these facts as part of the meeting. Of course, this
For real?
130-foot tall. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, well, you can see dozens in this. It's just the very, very bottom of it. It's a 130-foot tall marble column called the Victory Column. I told you what victory it celebrates. And you should know that it has actually, they've been counted, I think it's over 5,000 separately carved Roman soldiers. Now, they're not life size. They're, I think, a third. I've stood in front of it. In fact, I'm sure that's about right. They're about a quarter or a third life size, because these are smaller, these guys down here, than the ones up here. But they're, all shorter than less than half life size. But that's a lot of carving. And they all are carved, or these scenes, I'm sorry, are carved to show different moments in that campaign, the defeat of the Dacians. But that's only part of the meaning, because the Romans wouldn't leave that much territory. Look how big Romania is. A pretty big country. It's one of the biggest countries in Europe. And so what did the Romans do with that now empty, conquered province? They imported millions of Roman citizens because they had a bad problem in Italy. We just say Italy itself was overpopulated. The heart of the empire, of course, was Italy, obviously. So they needed more land for, farmers and, merchants and so. So millions of people were shipped from Italy by the Roman government into this province, and they founded a new province. Guess what they called it? Romania. In case you wondered, some of you may know this, that's how the country got its name 2,000 years ago, from this event. You see how history still echoes today. And so if you might add this, I mean, to me, it's interesting because I talked to some Romanians on a train when I was going from Poland to Kiev overnight, a family of gypsies actually on the train, and they were citizens of Romania, and they spoke, well, besides their own dialect, they spoke Romanian, of course. And guess what? It's the only language. Here's the one last fact you could add about the meaning, that this was the only language it is to this day in all of Eastern Europe that is Latin based. Well, for obvious reasons, because they're all descended, not all of them, the gypsies aren't, but the majority of the population of Romania was descended from these imported Roman citizens inserted into that province 19 centuries ago, right? If you do the math, almost 2,000 years ago. So see how history doesn't just be a dead thing that happened a long time ago and has no influence on us, obviously. So here we have a Latin-based culture and language in Eastern Europe, where everything else is Slavic, right? And they all have a different alphabet than Western Europeans do. It's because of this event. So it's another major event in at least Western history that still has echoes today. So if you're curious what these scenes depict, that you could add that as part of me. That's Neptune. Remember, he was the Greek and Roman god of the waters. I used to say seas, but I was corrected a couple of times when I first started teaching, because he was the god of all waters, including the river. It's called the Danube. Some of you have heard of it. There's a thing called the Blue Danube Waltz. You don't have to write that, but that's the river these soldiers are crossing on a bridge made of their own boats. You see that? They're just creating their own bridge because, of course, the Dacians would have destroyed. They wouldn't have had a bridge probably, because they had to raid the borders of the empire. So they're crossing over from the edge of the Roman Empire into Dacia on a bridge made of boats on the Danube. If you want to write which river, you could just say a river, but it was the Danube. I think everyone's seen that word, but if you haven't, it's capital D-A-N-U-B-E, the largest river in Europe. It was the border of the Roman Empire, but not after they took this province, because look how far if you just look at a map, it's a pretty amazingly far away from Rome. But it was the farthest flung, or you could say one of the farthest flung provinces of the Roman Empire. And this was the day, I guess, the second invasion occurred, when they wiped out the Dacian adult male population and exiled all the rest. And so Neptune is helping them. Of course, he's their god, so they're going to show that he's there trying to help them cross the river. And here they are building a siege fort. You don't have to write all this, but that's what's some part of the meaning. You could add these if you want to for your notes on the meaning. The second panel above the first one, this is the bottom of the, right here is the bottom of the column. So the second level up shows some of the, once they got into Dacia, they then needed to besiege, of course, that's the only word, besiege, right? One word, besiege, the Dacian cities and forts. So they're building their siege forts, which they then can use to attack the Dacian fortresses. So these are, you could just say Roman soldiers conducting various operations during the invasion. You could just say it that way. But this used to be more specific if you choose to write about it. If, again, I'm not saying it will be, if it doesn't get cut from the study list after the break, and it does appear on the midterm essay question you'd want to mention, the bottom panel at least specifically is them crossing the border, a river, well, you want to be specific, it's the Danube River, into Dacia for their final, you could say, or second invasion, in which they totally wiped out the Dacians with the help of Neptune here. I mean, it looks like he's just looking at them, but supposedly he's making sure they get across the river. All right, and this is not something you have to write about, but can anybody think of any victory columns anywhere in the United States? I can think of one that's right here in the Bay Area, and I'll bet you've all seen. And well, if you've never been to the center of San Francisco,
but oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
I forgot the name.
Do you need me to?
It's like a pile, isn't it?
Okay, it's in Union Square.
Yeah, Union Square.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, you're right. It's Union Square. It's this giant marble column that I think is at least as tall as this one. It's over 100 feet, and it commemorates the American naval victory over the Spanish Navy in Manila Bay, which is now, of course, well, I think it was then the capital, but of an independent country. Back then it was a colony of Spain, and we took it over, saying we were going to give them independence, and it took 50 years for them to get their own independent government, but at least they have one now. The Philippines, right? So that was the Spanish-American War. You don't have to write that, but it's just an interesting parallel. There's also a victory column for various events during the Civil War or the American Revolution. Several cities on the East Coast have victory columns. I know New York does, Boston, I think does, Baltimore does. I don't know if Washington does, maybe it does, but just, other cities around and all over Europe. Almost every European capital that ever had an overseas empire, which is the majority of Western Europe, like Madrid, Paris, London, Berlin, they almost all have, and Rome itself, have more modern, like 19th century as in 18 or 20th century, 1900s. Victory columns, they're still a common feature in many parts of mostly in the Western world, but actually there's a couple in China, someone in China too. So they're all over the world. The Romans started that idea too, but you got a long enough list, of 6 things invented by the Romans. I'm not going to add to that. All right, formal analysis. We've got to speed up the pace here. It's full of rhythm. Obviously, the soldiers repeat each other, and then the stonework on the fortresses that they're building, the boats, the wooden boats that they're walking across the river on. Of course, lots of rhythm. For space, well, it's the real space, and it's the images of space. So the column itself is 130 feet tall, carved with thousands, you don't have to say exactly how many thousands of figures, but you should maybe have that in your notes already, 5,000 or more than 5,000, which overlap each other, but there is diminishing size here. If you look closely, the fortress walls in the distance here, well, that would be a Roman city on the border of their own empire. So, but they are smaller than this section here. So you could say there's diminishing size, foreshortening. You do see a little bit of it on the edges of the walls here. Don't see it on the second panel here, not really, but on the bottom panel. So there's foreshortening, overlapping, of course, of all the figures over each other, right, and over the background of the soldiers. So there's overlapping primarily on all the figures, or all the panels, I should say, and then there is diminishing size and foreshortening in some parts of it. It's almost entirely stable. I mean, of course, the column is round, but also tall and straight. So it's both. I'm talking about the scene you're looking at, and this is the view you'll have if it's on the exam. Obviously, the soldiers are almost all upright in this panel, and here some of them are in motion. So it's a mixture of dynamic and stable, but the walls behind them are almost all stable on both of these two panels. You don't have to even, this panel you can't see well enough. Okay, and then is there a larger and smaller mass? Well, but the only thing you can say is Neptune is the largest mass on the bottom panel, and then it's a close call. Maybe the bridge of boats, it looks like one mass. And then the soldiers, individual soldiers. That's good enough. You don't have to describe the masses of this, the upper panel. And everything is, the simulated textures is superb, as it would be being a Roman monument. All the carved line that's used to create simulated texture, of course, creates the impression of armor, stonework, hair, right? Even wood down here on the boats. All that's realistic simulated texture. The column itself is marble, so there is that real texture. But here, I don't see the plain marble anywhere. It's all covered with decorative carved simulated texture everywhere you look. Okay, a balance, each panel is roughly balanced, I would say. Now, some people think this is unbalanced toward the right, but to me, these fortresses balance it out. And Neptune's pretty much in the middle there, and then this gateway way in between that. So actually, no, Neptune's, sorry, that's what I meant. When you add him in the forts, I should have said, and you make this the middle of the panel, the way it's photographed in this image, it's roughly balanced left to right. And I would say the same up here too. And there's the rhythm, of course, of the repeated human bodies, arms, hands, legs, and then of course their armor and heads and things. Okay, so this is the next must know. This is Equestrian Statue of Marcus Aurelius. Sorry, it's a long one. Equestrian is EQUESTRIAN. Equestrian.
I believe we did this last time.
I'm sorry, what?
I believe we did this last time.
Oh, good. I thought we did. So we didn't get to this one. All right. I mean, we got to this one. We didn't. Now, did we get to? No, that's too far forward. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. It sounded familiar. And you know what? I'm going to tell you, I'm going to cut it from the study list anyway, because it's such a long title and, you know, you have enough other things to study. We covered all of these, and did we cover the frescoes? I think we only did this one, right? This is the,
Yeah, we didn't do the one with the man, I think.
which one?
The one you passed before going to this one.
Oh yeah. But we did this one, right? I think we did.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah,
We did.
cityscape, one word. Okay, so I'm just double checking on my, we did the Dionysian one, didn't we? Yeah, I talked about this, right? This is that cult
Yes, we did
that
this.
abused children. And then this is the one from a house of the wife of the first emperor, Augustus' wife, Olivia, Casa Olivia. Right. Okay, so we're in good shape because we just still have one more must know. And conveniently, the best view of it I've ever had to show my classes is my own slides of it, because I wrote a paper on it when I was a student, an undergraduate at Cal. And when I went to Rome the first time, years later, I still remember this. So let us now do stop screen share. And there is going to be, in other words, keep your paper out in front of you, your notes taking paper, your pens at the ready, but you can rest for a few minutes while we just look at my own slides, which is going to take, you know, about 90 seconds, assuming it goes smoothly here, of Rome. And one of those will be our last must know. And I'll tell you when we get to it, and I think you'll find it fascinating because it shows the first 4 Roman emperors all in one place at one time. And I'll tell you a little bit about each one. That isn't already obvious. Okay, whoops, I did the wrong thing. That's not what I wanted to do. That's all right. My own slides, let's see, slides of Rome. I know they're on here. Give me about 2 minutes here. Sorry, there we go. Rome. So in this will be one more must know, okay? But let's just go straight to this. And then, of course, what we have to do is reduce it and get back to screen share. So let me get rid of all this other fluff. The background there. And hit screen share, and we should be in business. Well, then I still have to bring it up and enlarge it. Okay. Yeah, it says you can now see my application, so I guess I don't have to ask you the way you guys have been so helpful when you let me know that. So you guys can see this. Don't have to take notes for the next several minutes. Just relax, and I think you'll find this interesting, if not entertaining. These are gleaned from, I've been to Rome 4 times. As you might imagine, as an art historian, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. And any of my students who've been there, even if they, had never been interested in history, let alone specifically Roman history before, they always come back really very motivated to learn more about this rather remarkable culture in both good and bad ways. I mean, pretty much like all major cultures that have, including ours, of course, massive influences outside just their own home territory. There's the good and the bad to everything, and so I'm just going to tell you what each of these sites are as individual structures. You don't have to write any of the notes until we get to the last must know will be the Ara Pacis, and that'll be toward the end of this. And then we'll take our break, and then we'll have plenty of time to review give you an overview of how the exam is going to be given, how to study, what's going to be on it or not on it. Okay, that'll be after the break. Okay, this is the Roman Forum. We're starting with the Forum, which I think everybody knows what that was, right? The word means the same things it did back then. It means the government center. But the actual Latin word, don't have to write any of this, is to come together. So it's where all the major government buildings came together, where the people would come together to conduct government business. We're talking about the main temples and government structures and monuments. So this is one here. Let's go up close to it. You see there's the road that begins the Roman road system. And I already mentioned that it's in the list of things invented by ancient Romans, that they invented interstate road systems. Well, there's the beginning of the first one. That is over 2,500 years old. By the time that was built, when the Etruscans were kicked out, you don't have to remember this, but about 500 BC is when Rome really began to slowly increase its power and its wealth and its territory. It wasn't yet an empire, of course, but when Rome began to grow as a powerful city, they began this road system. So it's 2,500 years old. We're going to take a close look at that. And actually, this is the more, yeah, that's right. Actually, the arrow should be over here because this is all part of it. But the original oldest pieces of stone, the stonework itself, you'll see in my close-up, surviving 25 centuries, pretty remarkable. Okay, in fact, there we have that's part of it. It's called the Vium Forum Romanum. Pretty much says what it is, the way of the Roman Forum. You can see most of the structures, of course, fall into ruin, but there's still several that have anywhere from one portion of them to a couple are intact, such as this temple. We'll get a close-up of it, and the Arch of Titus we already saw, but I'll show you a quick view of it again. Okay. So when you're standing above,
You really need to knock into me. That's the second time.
I'm sorry.
Get in
What?
there.
I'm sorry.
Daniel, your mic was unmuted.
Yeah, I couldn't hear what that last comment was. Okay, so this is not something that obviously reflects the history of Rome, but it's there are more cats in Rome than people. That's not true of all cities with a large pet population. And there was a very bright, enterprising young photographer. I actually saw interviews with him on Italian TV. He spoke both English and Italian, of course. And it was his idea to create a calendar every year for both tourists and native Italians called Il Gatti di Roma, which of course translates to the cats of Rome. And this is the kind of picture he would have taken. This isn't a copy of one of his views on the cat, but I bought a couple for friends, of course, who had cats back in California to take home with me. And the cats, they're feral, of course. And these cats are, but they seem to have a decent life. People feed them, of course. And look what they're sitting on, this one anyway, right on one of those 2,500-year-old, 25 century old paving stones from the first Roman road. This is a part of their system. Okay, this is the temple to their god of war, Mars. So it was built by Augustus when he was the first emperor, and it was an entire building out of marble. Well, he had a saying, again, this is not anything you have to remember for the exam, but he had a saying that when he became emperor, he found Rome a city of brick, but when he left, as in when he passed on toward the end of his life, he said, and I left her, Rome, of course, a city of marble. Well, that's not much of an overstatement, if any, because he rebuilt almost every temple in the Forum that wasn't already marble. Most of them weren't when he took over in his 45 years on the throne as the emperor. Rebuilt them like this one in marble, and you can see the effect of that. These columns are the original columns. The rest of the temple, of course, collapsed a long time ago. And then these columns here, the white marble, is a little different than the others, are above the original brick remains of whatever temple that was. And I don't remember what this temple was, but I know what this was. Some of you heard of these people. These unfortunate, or were they fortunate, young women. They were on average 15 years old at the time the emperor or some of his agents would pick them, and they'd have no choice. They had to go live here the rest of their lives. It was called the Vestal Virgins. And there were, I think it was 15 of them, and their job was to keep the eternal flame burning and never let it go out, because the Romans believed that their religion taught them that if the eternal flame inside this temple was ever allowed to go out, Rome would fall. Well, guess what? The first time it went out was 410 AD, which Rome fell for the first time. Now they kicked those invaders out after that, but Rome had never been entered, let alone conquered by an invading army before that. So maybe there's some truth to that myth. Anyway, the people that were the young women that were picked for that, they had to be, very good families. I think not only upper class, but well educated, and they would have to spend the rest of their lives on the grounds, not just inside one building. It was a complex of buildings, so they had all their foods and their fancy clothes and jewels and things, and they got to only out of the complex of the temple complex. This is one section of a wall that's left from it, where they were allowed to join public parades, which is what you're going to see on the last must-know when we do the Areopagus at the end of this segment before we take a break. So they got to march with the emperor and his family and senators and so forth several times a year, probably once a month on average, because Romans had a lot of religious holidays on their calendars. But that's the only time they got out of this compound, if you want. So they were, prisoners in essence, except that it was supposed to be an honor. And if they were chosen, their family couldn't say no, not to the emperor. So, when some of them either got too old to carry out their duties or were sick or died, they would then find someone to replace them. They were called the Vestal Virgins. And they lived in this complex, which is all that's left of that is this one portion. But this building's fascinating. This is an almost intact early Roman temple, and it's dedicated not to, but by one of their best emperors. I mentioned him last week, Marcus Aurelius, who was the guy that was the first one to pause. That's the right word, right? The persecution of the Christians and Jews and other religious minorities. He was a humanist by comparison, of course, we're saying relatively to the other Roman emperors, most of the other Roman emperors. Let's see, Claudius was also a humanist, and you're going to see something about him. And if you don't know who he was, you will by the end of the one last must-know slide. I'll tell you who those first four emperors were. So most Roman emperors didn't care about anything about human rights, let alone have a high. They were educated, they could read. Some of them were well educated, but he was absolutely the equivalent of an academic scholar, right? He was the one that had all the background as a professor and an author and a philosopher before he became emperor. Well, he was happily married his whole life, his whole adult life, or nearly his whole life, until a few years before he died. His wife passed away before him, and he grieved so much he didn't want to remarry. He could have, of course, with any eligible Roman citizen of age, that he wanted, and he chose not to remarry. So the Roman Senate honored the memory of his deceased wife. And again, you'll have to write this, by building a temple in her memory, and that's what we're looking at. The church behind what was the actual temple is still there. See these walls? That's part of the original temple, as are the stairs, the foundation, and the portico. All that's missing is the pediment. So that section there, the whole facade, in other words, attached to the front of the old Roman emperor temple. Temple. That part is 1620. It's about exactly 400 years ago, same year that the Pilgrims landed in Massachusetts, right? So it's a baby. You go to Europe, people laugh when you look at something and say, "Wow, that's old." It's 150 years old. That's not old in Europe, not even, or in Asia for that matter. It is here in America, of course. So that's a new addition to the facade of the original Roman structure, which is at least 15 centuries later. after the temple, which was built in the second century AD. And that temple, that church, it's a Catholic church. Now they converted this whole site into, now that is a functioning Catholic church owned by the Catholic Church, but maintained as a public monument. Look at these massive columns. They're 60 feet tall, these marble columns. And then we have what I think is the most fascinating thing after we see some of the Vium Forum Romanum. I was talking about the first part of the Roman road system. That's it right there. Those are the oldest paving stones, well, maybe in the world, but certainly in the Western world that we know the date of or the origin of. There's the entrance, these stairs, these marble stairs. I mean, it could use some repair. I imagine they have done some since I was there. Last time I was there was 2000. But these stairs are the original stairs. We already saw the facade is the only thing missing is the portico. I mean, not the portico, the pediment above the portico. But my favorite thing is this piece that's sitting right in front of it. There she is. She's in heaven. The Romans believed that when someone died, especially the wife of an important person like a senator, let alone this woman, who was, of course, the emperor's wife, when they died after they were deceased, they'd go to a place called, you'll have to write this, but Elysian Fields, the Romans. It's pretty similar to the concept of heaven that many Western cultures have now, or religious beliefs have. So there she is, not exactly an angel, but in the afterlife. She was a dancer when Marcus Aurelius met her. And they had many children, one of whom, if you've seen the movie Gladiator, I think I've mentioned this, but I can't remember because I have two classes covering the same material 1 week apart. So forgive me if I repeat myself, but if you haven't seen the movie Gladiator, if you have an interest in this period of history, just for your own interest, in fact, you know what, if you wrote 2 pages about what you learned about Roman culture, because it does a really good job of showing what the architecture of Rome looked like during the golden age of the Roman Empire. It's called Gladiator with Russell Crowe. I think he won the Academy Award for it. The movie won several. It's excellent. And yes, Marcus Aurelius' son was Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix, beautifully, except for the detail of him killing his father by suffocating him with him. And that's not how Marcus Aurelius died. He died peaceful in his bed of natural causes. Okay, so there she is. She's about 1/3 life size, and that was part of the pediment that has been missing. So only one section is left, and they just leave it there at eye level because this is 6 feet here. So she's about half life size. It's fascinating, showing her dancing in heaven. Okay, we'll pick up the pace. And this is what we already saw. I don't have to repeat it. There you see the Arch of Titus. But this one is particularly interesting. I'll keep it brief. This arch is one most people never heard of unless you go to Rome. It's the Arch of Septimus Severus. So anytime you hear the word severe, don't be so severe where someone's acting severely. The root word comes from his name. He was beyond severe. He was brutal even by Roman emperor standards. He had secret police, and I'll show you a close up here of him having mass executions of anyone who tried to oppose him. What happened was Rome was starting to decline by the 3rd century, the 200s. So sometime in the first half of that century, the early 200s, he ruled for 20 years, which was really unusual because most of the emperors in that last 100 or 150 years before Constantine, we will talk about him after the midterm's over. That'll be our next topic, is early, quote, Christian and Byzantine art. Anyway, the point is that this guy Severus was the only emperor who survived more than a few years. Most of the other emperors for over 150 years after Marcus Aurelius, when the empire slowly started to decline, only lasted 2 or 3 years on the throne. Can anybody guess why? It wasn't plagues, wasn't drought, wasn't infections. Assassinations. I think you guys said it. Yes. It just was so tempting for their top general or bodyguards or another person, even a senator, though I don't think too many senators got away with that. But quite a few of the military commanders would take over the empire and become the next emperor by just offing that current emperor. And he knew that. So he managed to keep power for 20 years, a very long reign as Roman emperors of that era go, by terror. Just literally he had a force of terrorists, sort of like certain people currently running Russia, and then Stalin and a few other places. We've seen that happen, of course, in the last few generations. But that was his whole modus operandi. So to be severe comes from his name, and this is a monument to his rule, and that is original, by the way. That's the original lettering saying what a great emperor he was, and if you dare question it, you will be beheaded, tortured, whatever. If you're lucky, maybe sold into slavery. Okay, we're going to skip over this because it's the Arch of Constantine. I just mentioned he was the first Christian emperor. I think I did. If I didn't, you hear me talk about it. So let's not get off on a tangent here, because what I do want to do is spend an appropriate amount of time on the last must-know and still show you the interiors of the Coliseum and the Pantheon, and where you don't need to take notes, you already have those. But this is a monument to the first Christian emperor named Constantine from the 4th century. And then he actually, as do most cultures, if they last long enough, the Roman Empire lasted well over 500 years, have ups and downs, and he sort of reversed the decline. Well, he did, there's no question. If it wasn't for him, the Roman Empire would have fallen 150 years sooner than it did. And of course, he also spread Christianity throughout the empire. We'll talk about that when we get to the slides of early Christian and Byzantine art. But this is one of it is the most ornate of all of the monuments of the Triumphal Arches. It commemorates his victory over his rivals who tried to take the throne away from him in battle. And it shows him, there he is. He was the tallest Roman emperor at 6'4", as well as the first Christian one. But it's a beautiful monument. Look at the detail here. Life-size images of Roman soldiers and victory angels. They love putting those on these triumphal arches. Now here's the Coliseum, and I do have to mention this. I think some of you will understand if you've taken, any kind of group tours and you've heard people's comments, and maybe sometimes they aren't focused in on what they're looking at. They're unclear on where they are. There was a tour bus that day from Teaneck, New Jersey. Anybody from New Jersey here? I'm not going to diss the state of New Jersey. I have friends there. In fact, I've stayed in Teaneck with one such family. It's just kind of a cliche. Hey, they're from Teaneck, New Jersey. Okay, so it was a tour bus from just that city. It said right on the bus of American tourists, of course, and a couple of them got out and walked up close to this. The bus was parked somewhere along here. I'm sure they had, cones around it so it wouldn't get hit by the speeders. And they do speed, these Italian cars speed around this. It's a traffic circle all the way around the Coliseum. Anyway, so they were standing, within the gates here where it was safe, looking up at this scaffolding. It was a different day, but it was on my same trip. I took these slides. And one of them said to the other, "What do you think that scaffolding's there for, Mabel?" And the other said, "I don't know, Ethel, unless I think I know. That's what's been holding it up all these years." 2,000 years it's been there. No, it's not. It's obviously only for cleaning of the exterior stonework, because it's a very polluted city. Rome I was there luckily when the winds were so strong you didn't see it, but it can be quite polluted. It's 8 million people and a lot of cars and trucks and buses. So of course they need to clean it, just like we do the Golden Gate Bridge and other public monuments all around the world are clean. So those were what I call unclear on the concept tourists. That they didn't know what they were looking. They didn't understand what they were looking at. It hasn't needed anything to hold it up for 2,000 years. So let's go up close and go inside it. You see the rows of columns here, of course, and of course from this angle it's so obvious that the scaffolding is being held up by the building, not the other way around. But you're going to see something that I think is a story you wouldn't hear anywhere else but here when we get really close to these arches. So let's get up close to some of them. You see some of them are pocked. Well, there's two causes for why some of the stonework on the arches and the columns on the outer layer of stone surrounding the Coliseum, why they're damaged. One explanation is some of them, the damage was done by those popes, or that one pope, actually one pope, who stole some of the marble, all of the marble actually, from a third of the walls, which just left the brick outer layer on that 1/3 of this structure. But on the rest of it, where there is marble, there was also a thin layer of even finer marble, with fancy color or grading to it. And so he stole some of that marble too for building churches and things. So you see the evidence of the damage. But the other reason for the damage is an event that happened during World War II, which rarely gets mentioned, and I imagine no other class you'll ever hear this. But when Rome was liberated, that is the right word, by British and American soldiers, mostly American soldiers, but the Brits were definitely part of that. from Mussolini and Hitler. The Italians welcomed them. I mean, there's no quite, you can see film of that. I mean, obviously they were sick and tired of being under a dictator, and Hitler, of course, would have been even worse than Mussolini. So they were welcoming them, and then suddenly shots rang out from the Coliseum. I don't know if it's the same day the Americans arrived or probably the next day, and all kinds of people were shot to death, by sniper fire from inside the Coliseum. Why? Because a group of about, I think they even know how many, but let's say a roughly 200, it's called company, the military term, around 200 crack SS soldiers had refused to evacuate with the rest of the German army and stayed after to kill civilians. In others, it was a suicide mission. So what the US commander who had liberated Rome had was a very difficult decision to make. So now let's see another close-up of what happened, the evidence of what happened. See these pock marks? Not all of them are from pieces of stonework that were pried off these exterior, fancier marble cladding. Some of them are bullet holes. Why? Because that commander made a decision that I think the Italian people consider him a hero, at least the ones that know about this event, which is he could either have used U.S. Air Force. Of course, we could have easily, well, we didn't have an Air Force, and it was the Army. We could use U.S. military planes to bomb those soldiers out of their nests inside the Coliseum and possibly ruin the entire, or at least severely damage this world monument. Or his choice was the second option, send in some US soldiers, and it took them a couple of days of hand-to-hand combat, and of course many of the Americans died in that fight against the diehard SS soldiers, but they had to kill them all. I don't think maybe a handful surrendered. So it was a firefight, hand-to-hand combat, close quarters, with machine guns and rifles. And so that's what you call sacrificing for art. So that is why I say that that's one of those stories where, the Italians who know about it consider those men and the commander who made the decision heroes for obvious reasons. This is what's left of the outer walls where the Pope I just was talking about, his name was Julius, the one that forced Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling and build St. Peter's. He had an edifice complex, I used to tell my students. Not Oedipus, but edifice. He stole the marble from this section, but it left what, of course, was then mostly the brick portions and some other kind of stones that were there still. So it's still an intact. It's not a circle; it's an oval. So let's walk under these arches, and now you see a sight. If you ever get to Rome, you'll never forget. It set chills down my spine. I don't know about anybody else, but I believe there's something to the idea of reincarnation. I felt like I'd been there when I stood there looking up at this 70,000 people. And this level, the upper nosebleed level, standing room only, plus all these wooden seats here. And then the marble seats belong to the upper classes, mostly Roman senators. And the emperor would have had a whole separate booth, like a box seat with his whole family here. And of course, they were all cheering one way or the other for the life or death, to spare or take the life of a defeated gladiator, or perhaps the other events, even more gruesome, of tied up Christian and Jews and gypsies and whatever minorities were that day's sacrifice, to be sacrificed in front of, by lions or fire, whatever. So it's one of those intense places. There are hardly any Coliseums. They're already covered this. You have to write it right. It's one of the largest. It was at the time the largest outdoor amphitheater, but it also was, even to this day, there are very few Coliseums. Quote, that's the word we use. It's at sports arenas. A better word is arena. Yeah, outdoor arenas that are this large. Very few. This was the floor where the gladiators were kept in cages, pens, whatever you want to call them, cells, until they were told to go up. Usually the night before, they were given a fancy meal, sometimes their last meal, and a pep talk by somebody. Sometimes the emperor himself would come down. And then when they were sent up to either victory or death, they would have gone up through. There was a floor here. It's missing, of course, now, but some of the floor has been rebuilt. I think it's a third or more of it has been rebuilt. They may eventually rebuild the whole floor, and then perhaps there'll be not mock naval battles, but some kind of, public entertainment, non-violent, of course, run by the Italian government, perhaps. These are where the senators sat, these marble seats. Of course, they brought their own cushions and, fans. And of course, umbrellas to shade them, and food and slaves, of course, attend to them. And then the emperor would have had a box seat right around here. Okay. And then this is the column of Trijon or Trajan that we just talked about. We were looking at the bottom section. You see just these bottom 3 levels. You see it's 130 feet. And all of that's added by the Catholic Church. If it's not obvious, this is a Catholic saint, and nothing to do with the original purpose of the monument or the Roman Empire, really. So everything from the platform above is added just a few hundred years ago, probably in the 1600s, maybe 1500s, sometime in the last 3 centuries. But here's the detail. You see how it looks when you get up to it. There's the base. It's all marble. And then we saw Neptune. In fact, you could barely see, but there are those boats, right, coming across. So you see some parts of it. That's why I use the other professional slide. You can see the detail more easily on that. Okay, and that we already covered the statue of Marcus Aurelius. And up here on the hill above the forum was where the senators, the emperor and his wife, and many other of his family members would have lived. The highest hill in Rome, it looks down on the forum. And these are ruins of the Casa Olivia. That is the wife. We already talked about her, right? The wife of Augustus, the first emperor and empress, in essence. And she's the one whose son, her oldest son, became the second Roman emperor after she may or may not have engineered the death of his natural born children. That's an open mystery of history, whether she had anything to do with their death under mysterious circumstances in a short period of time, one right after the other. So it is suspicious. Anyway, these are the walls, of which they've been even more thoroughly restored. Now, these slides are good, probably 4 decades old. When I was still a college student when I took these. And then we have some of the bathhouses, the ruins of which are up on this. This is one of the larger bathhouses. I think I mentioned that they had 3 temperatures. For the wealthy upper class, of course, patrons, they had warm water. And for the average or middle class citizens, well, that wouldn't have been average. The middle class wasn't even half of the population. But it was in Rome, there were people that made a decent living from stores, being merchants or craftspeople, small business people. They got lukewarm water for their baths, and so they had 3 sections in each of these bathhouses. And of course, you can guess the poor, at least they had a place to clean up. They got cold water. But at least everyone had towels and soap provided by the government. This was the Circus Maximus. I already talked about this when we saw the cityscape. It's in that fresco. You can see it in the background up above where the entrance to that particular Roman noble's villa, urban villa was. With all the columns, or these are what some of those columns would have been when they were intact. These aren't even half the length. This could hold 200,000 people when it was full. We're looking at less than half of the length. It's where all the chariot races were held. Okay, we're doing pretty well on time because we'll have just enough time to take you to the Arapakis. And I'll end with interior views of the Parthenon and the Pantheon. I said Parthenon, the Pantheon. We'll end with that. This is Augustus's tomb. It's fascinating because it's so massive, and he's one of those emperors that chose not to be cremated. Some did, some didn't. So he was actually interred here in a large mausoleum, a large, marble, probably solid marble. But what's now the last must know. So now you do need to take notes for the last slide before the midterm. This is the Arapakis, 2 words, A-R-A, and then capital P-A-C-I-S, 2 words. It means the Arch of Peace. And it's on your syllabus, so you should be able to see the date, but I'll give that to you, of course. And that was 9 BC, and it's from Rome, or BCE. If it's on the test, this is the view you'll have. These are my own slides. Like I said, I'd written a paper on this, so I was really up for seeing it. And it's in a small museum. It was discovered during the excavation in the 1930s. You don't have to know when, you could say in the 1900s or the 20th century, for the Roman subway system. So some workers found it in sections, but it was nearly intact, even if it was broken into pieces. None of the main pieces were missing, or we wouldn't be looking at it. So they dug it out, restored it, and put it on display. It's in a glass museum now. The whole museum, the walls are glass. So you can see at night it's lit up. It's fascinating. But the time to go is, of course, to get up close and look at it and know what you're looking at. So here's the main part of the meaning. What does it depict? It depicts a parade. You could say a better word is procession, because they were all on foot. You could see that, of the emperor and all of his extended family. The first emperor, Augustus, that's where my arrow is. If you get up close, you can probably see he's the oldest person here. He was already well into his 50s when this was created, this monument. What does it celebrate? The 20th anniversary of his becoming emperor. He still had another 25 years to go. So 20 years into his reign, he had, remember, it's part of the meaning of this slide, and so this term you should have in your notes. He had created the Pox Romana. I had already spelled that for you, right? 2 words, Pax Romana, just like it sounds with capital R. That period of 2 centuries of peace and prosperity and stability. Peace, prosperity, and stability that the Roman people were grateful for after all the civil wars they'd been through before he came along. So here he is, a hero to most, at least, citizens of Rome, the first Roman emperor. And then we have his wife. Some people debate which one of these women is Olivia. But this one almost certainly would be. She wouldn't march further behind him. Some historians think, but look, the 4 paces behind, plus this woman's too young to be his wife. So this is probably almost certainly, you could say, Livia, Livia, the wife of the first emperor. And then we know this is Tiberius, her oldest son, who became the second emperor. I'll spell his name again, like the river that runs through Rome. Tiberius, Tiberius. He was a really corrupt emperor, but by comparison, the third emperor was even worse. Tiberius, unlike Augustus, was not very empathetic. He forced people, married couples, to come to the palace and engage in all kinds of horrible behavior. If he was attracted to either, because he was bisexual, either the husband or the wife or both. And he did all kinds of things to his enemies. The worst thing he did was to make his nephew, there he is, little baby Caligula, the third emperor, in his will. Caligula, Caligula, was the worst Roman emperor of all time. Now that's saying a lot, because the majority of Roman emperors were anywhere from competent to cruel, somewhere in that range. And then every so often you get one who was, really talented and really, good ruler, and that'd be Augustus. And then the fourth one we'll talk about is the guy right here. But let's talk about, if you don't know who Caligula was, then you should add something in your notes about that. He was by far the most mentally ill. Several of the Roman emperors were, unstable is putting it mildly. He was absolutely mentally ill. Some think he was schizophrenic because he didn't have a diagnosis back that far for what that meant. But he would have visions and nightmares, and he thought he was actually a god, literally. He believed he was a god on earth, and he thought his horse was a god. He had the Roman Senate declare his horse a god, and the Roman Senate had to allow his horse to vote with his hoof during Senate debates. Okay, you get the idea. But if that's not enough, he impregnated his own sister, thinking that then she'd become his empress, and their child would become a great god and the next emperor. Well, obviously that was sick, but worse than that is he disemboweled her when she was 8 months pregnant to prevent that from happening, because he suddenly had second thoughts. Wait a minute, if I have an even more powerful child, it'll overtake my reign. That's about as sick as you can get. Yeah, there have been movies, plays, documents, novels about him, Caligula, the most vile of all the Roman emperors. And guess what? After only a few years of that kind of sick behavior, his own bodyguards assassinated him in the palace and declared the fourth Roman emperor was Caligula's uncle and the nephew of Augustus, one of their best emperors. The last thing you should write about the meaning, and that's Claudius. Claudius was a really competent emperor. He created the port, which they needed to get grain from all over the empire to feed the poor. He distributed food and clothing and, aid to the poor, but much more than any previous emperor. Augustus did some of it, but he was even more so. He was a reformer compared to any other Roman emperor before him. So he's one of the better ones. And he had 3 strikes against him. He had polio, so he walked with a limp. He had a hunchback. He was born, quote, deformed, unquote. I mean, he had a pronounced hunch in his back of his body. And he had a lifelong stutter. He never was able to overcome it the way most of the time Biden is able to, right? That's a condition you're born with, by the way, if you didn't know that. So those are three, quote, birth challenges or defects that he had, and boy, did he overcome them all. He was a very well-liked emperor, very well respected. So they got lucky when those bodyguards, as a joke, they made him emperor. They figured they could run the empire with him as a what do you call it, a showpiece, front, but he wouldn't. He was too smart for them. So he actually had the ones who engineered the assassination of Caligula executed, partly to remove them as a threat to himself. And then he became a very reform-minded, a very successful emperor. Okay, that's it on the meaning. We can do the form analysis quickly. It's completely balanced. Of course, the number of figures, you draw the line down the middle here where Olivia is. Obviously, the rhythm is just, self-evident. Repeated human bodies, arms, hands, legs, and of course the folds of their robes. All of those are carved lines which create simulated texture on their eyes. Well, you don't say eyes, their faces, their hands, their clothing, and some of them you can see their hair. That's all very sharp, realistic, simulated texture. Of course, the modeling is strong and realistic by definition, I mean, for obvious sake. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see these figures. So the modeling is just the shadows created by the sun, the natural modeling. The only technique for space is overlapping. That's it. Okay, and then we have the fact that there is no larger or smaller. Well, yeah, you could say Augustus. He is taller than, but then these two over here. So I don't think you can say they're larger or smaller masses. The male figures are roughly equal in size or mass, and the female adults are roughly equal. So there isn't really three masses larger or smaller than each. Okay, and then we have stable. It's entirely stable. There's nothing dynamic about it except the tops of their heads, unless you look at some parts of their robes. So you could say there are some dynamic detail. By the way, the color of the stone is a warm yellow. So that doesn't do justice. I think it's more evident here. It's a warm yellow color, even though this slide is slightly discolored. It's not a cool gray. Okay. So let's wrap it up with, let's go inside. Just take 2 or 3 minutes inside the Pantheon. You have to take notes now. You already did. Look at that massive portico and the name of the building carved across the front of it. But now we're going to go inside. Look at the walls. They dominate the scale of the portico, which is 60-foot tall marble columns. They're dwarfed by the building behind them. Those walls would be clad in marble too, if it weren't for an earlier pope who stole all kinds of marble from the outer walls of the Pantheon to make several different churches. So that's why the walls now are brick. And those columns are massive. Like you said, I didn't say it, they're 60 feet tall. Maybe I just did. That's Sven, a photographer from National Geographic. I actually got to know him. We ran to each other twice while we were both in Rome. He was on assignment for the magazine. He was 7 feet tall. And look how dwarfed he is by the columns. Okay, let's go inside. We'll wrap it up in about 2 minutes here. Look at that open ceiling, right? With the hole in the middle where the gods can look down at you while you pray and vice versa. It creates this spotlight effect. And that's the original concrete dome, which has never needed to be repaired, replaced. It's never had cracks in almost 2,000 years. The Romans obviously knew how to build for the ages. I don't think any building we've got in this country will last 2,000 years. If we don't have a war, that could wipe out everything. Even then, I just don't think the structures we build are that well built compared to the Romans. And these are the coffers, they're called. You have to know that term, that lighten up the weight of I think I mentioned it during the must know slides portion of this. Okay, let's wrap up with a couple of details and then one last little anecdote, and then we'll take our break. Okay, this is gold. What looks like gold is gold. It's what's left of, excuse me. Yeah, acid reflux does a number on your throat for a while afterwards. Okay, so what you see here are what looks like gold was originally totally encased in gold. The cornice lines inside the temple. And the last slide now, before we take our break, is the most amazing to me of all the slides of my own that I'm showing you tonight. The floor tilts. You can tell by looking at it, so it never floods. When the rain comes through that 30-foot wide opening, it splatters a bit on the floor. If you're standing right underneath it, you'll get wet. Otherwise, you won't get wet because it doesn't even pool or puddle enough to wet more than the bottom of your shoes. The water slowly, flows down toward the edges of the building and out through, these viaducts, these openings into sewers, and from there into the river. But it's the doors that are most mind-blowing. So we'll wrap it up with this brief little summation. Those are the original doors. They're 25 feet tall. They're solid bronze. They have the original lock on them. This is a Catholic church. I did tell you guys that, right? You should have that. It's about the meaning of it. Today it's functioning. It's for centuries. It's been a Catholic church. So every morning, a priest comes down from the Vatican in his little Pope mobile. Well, it's not a Pope mobile if he's not the Pope. Say his little vehicle with a velvet box. I watched this ceremony. I got to see it at 8 a.m. in the morning. I think it's just say you have to write this again. Every morning, he takes out the box, walks up to these doors, takes out the original key made by the Romans who designed this building 2,000 years ago, inserts it into the lock, and it opens. No WD-40 needed. That is a pretty strong testament to how well the Romans built. Okay, let's stop share and take a break. Okay, so it's 8:05. Do you want to make it 15 minutes break? Or we can make it 20, actually. No, we don't need more than about 50 minutes is max of what it takes to do the discussion of how the test can be given. So why don't we go ahead and call it 8:20? All right, I'll see you guys, and then we'll still end a few minutes early. But I'll stick around after that for any questions you have. But I think I'll be able to answer all of them for you. Okay, I'm going to pause the screen share. All right. Yeah, I mean the recording. Okay. Welcome. I gave you guys a couple more minutes because I know some people need a little longer break if you hadn't had dinner before class or you just got home from work or something. Okay, we should still be in a few minutes early, but I'm not going to rush in that. Any questions you have at any point along the way, about anything we're going to now go over on how the test will be given, and then also what is and isn't going to be on it. I'm not going to give you the slides that are on it. That would be, teaching to the test. That's not what we do here at this or any other college I ever taught at. But I'll reduce the list significantly. And if I take a look at let's all do this together. Take a look at your syllabus. Let's do this exercise first. It's maybe the most valuable single component of this overview of the test that I'm going to do for all of you, which is reducing I said 40%, there it is in print, the total number of slides on the syllabus that might be on the test by at least 40%. And then I'll reduce by at least 30% because there aren't as many terms to know at least that much of the list of terms. Okay, so here we go. Let's start with, everyone now should have flipped to the top, the first page, right, of your syllabus for this class. And we're going to cut the list as we go week by week. And then I'll repeat one other time the entire list of slides that you should be crossing off. That's how I would do it if I were you. I mean, that's the easiest thing, just with your pen, cross them out. The ones that I tell you aren't going to be on the test. All right, in order to do that, though, of course, is an exercise in simple math, which I know isn't always easy for people to do. So I'll do this now, but you want to follow along with me and do the counting, you can. To make sure we don't do anything less than 40% in the reduction process. So how do we do that? Let's start with how many slides are there before we start reducing them, and then figure out what 40% of that is, of course, and then accordingly reduce the list by that many. All right, so I'm just going to count silently here for the total number of slides. Well, it's 51. So that's an odd number. But since I've already cut one slide, young warrior. We'll call it 50, including that one. I mean, not counting, sorry, that one. So I need to cut 20 more slides. Exactly. That's 40% of 50. Right? Everybody's following here. So how do we do this? So you should be following along with your pens and your syllabus in hand. And we'll go week by week, and I'll tell you which ones to cut. Okay, from the first week, week 1, you're actually just going to cut the 3 slides after Laocoon. You don't cut Laocoon and his sons because it's ancient Greek and we covered Greek art. So we'll leave that one on. The first one under week 1, you don't cut. You cut all 3 of the remaining ones. So that's the Libyan Sibyl by Michelangelo, Wheat Fields with Cypress Trees by Van Gogh, and Guggenheim Museum by Wright. Those are slides that are from periods that we don't cover. And actually, I would be remiss if I did leave them on, because I'm not supposed to test you on anything that's not, I mean, that's the state requirements, not in the time period framework that we cover in this class. Okay, everybody's clear on. I'll repeat these all one time at the end. So that leaves you only 1 slide for week 1, Laocoon and his sons, okay? Moving on to week 2. Let's see, you're going to cut 2, Bison from France and Watchtower at Jericho from Palestine. All right, moving to week 3. We're going to cut Ashurnazirpal killing lions, Ishtar Gate from Babylon, and so it'll be 3, head of a ruler from Nineveh. Okay, that's 3 out of week 3. And moving on to week 4, we're going to cut the pylon of Ramses II and Amun. And I'll cut the throne of Tutankhamun because we're going to leave the mask of Tutankhamun on the list. So that's 2. And then let's cut 1 more. The slide wasn't that good, of Temple of Hatshepsut. So that's the 4th slide under week 4. Fourth down from the top. So it's a total of 3. Temple of Hatshepsut, pylon of Ramses II at Amun, and throne of Tutankhamun from week 4. Okay, moving on to week 5. Like I said, we'd already cut the young warrior, but you cross it out if you didn't already. Okay, and then we have, let's see, Lioness Gate at Mycenae. We'll cross that one out. Kouros from Athens. Temple of Athena Nike. And for now, we'll leave the last one, Nike Winged Victory on. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Lioness Gate at Mycenae, Kouros from Athens, the young warrior from Athens, and Temple of Athena Nike from week 5. Okay, week 6. Porta Augusta from Perugia. Let's see. Cityscape from Bosco Real. And for now, that's all. We're going to have to go back and maybe cut a couple more. So from tonight's selection, week 7, we'll cut the Villa, right? Livia fresco from Rome, and the House of the Dionysian Cult. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and cut the Equestrian Statue because that's a long, long title of Marcus Aurelius. Again, that's week 7. Equestrian Statue of Marcus Aurelius, Villa Livia wall fresco, and the House of the Dionysian Cult fresco. So let us go back to that first page and see if we did cut. Well, actually, it's to be 21, including the one I had already cut, which would leave you with only 30 that you have to consider for that might be on the exam. Okay, so we have how many in week 1? And I'll repeat the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I think we 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we need to cut 1 more. Okay, since we already have, go back to week 5, we'll just cut 1 more. we already have the temple of the Parthenon, which is dedicated to Athena and her, remember, there was a sculpture of her with her hand holding out the life-size figure, adult human-size figure of Nike. So that's, an adequate way of getting that information, still leaving it, on the test. So we'll cut out the last slide under week 5, which is Nike Winged Victory. Okay, so that's 21. That's slightly over 40%. It leaves you with 30 that might still be on the test. Let me repeat that list to make sure everybody has that, and then if anyone still has a question when I do that, doing that, please let me know before we go on to doing the same thing with the list of terms. Okay, once again, just double checking for everyone. Under week 1, you cut 3: the Libyan Sibyl, wheat field with cypress trees, Guggenheim Museum. Week 2, you cut 2: Bison from France and Watchtower at Jericho from Palestine. Week 3, you cut 3: Head of a Ruler from Nineveh, Ashur-Nazir-Paul killing lions, and Ishtar Gate from Babylon. Okay. Week 4, you cut 3 more: Temple of Hatshepsut, Pylon of Ramses II at Amun, and Throne of Tutankhamun. Week 5, you cut 5, actually: Lioness Gate at Mycenae, Kouros from Athens, Spear Bearer, not Spear Bearer, that's, actually we do, didn't I already do that? Not Spear Bearer, my apologies, not Spear Bearer, Young Warrior. Okay, I'm glad none of you said, wait, what? I'm not going to cut something as important as the first slide to use, or slide, the first known statue to use contrapposto. And that term is not being cut from the study list for terms to know, which we're going to do in just a minute. Sorry, I'll start again. For week 5, it's 5 slides. Lioness Gate at Mycenae, Kouros from Athens, Young Warrior from Athens, Temple of Athena Nike, and Nike Winged Victory from Samothrace. Okay, sorry about that slight glitch there. Moving on to week 6, you cut 2 more: Porta Augusta from Perugia, Cityscape from Boscorial. Week 7, Equestrian Statue of Marcus Aurelius, Villa 3 more: Villa Livia wall fresco, and the House of the Dionysian Cult from Pompeii. Okay, well, that's slightly over 40%. Okay, everybody's clear on that? And then we do the same kind of thing, but not quite as many reductions because it's a shorter list to begin with. So please take your list of terms to know for 1.1, and let's count how many there are, and then I have to reduce that list by at least 30%, is what I promised. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22. It's 22. So I should cut 7 of these slides. That's a little more than 30%, but I don't want to do less than 30%. Hang on. So follow along as we did the last time, exercise on the list of terms, and we'll go over them. There's 3 pages that we have covered. And remember, now these are the terms, the way I gave you the definitions that you wrote from the lectures, or if you missed a lecture that you heard me give during the videos from YouTube, which if you miss any lectures, you should have already watched. But if you didn't, you've got time to do that, plenty of time. Okay, so in other words, not the glossary terms that are the way they're defined. They're much more complex usually and a little more cumbersome and less clear, I think, in the back of, not that there's anything wrong with the definitions in Stockstead, but they're usually longer than the ones I give you. So don't have to go and look up these definitions. They're what you should already have written in your own notes on the pages of the list of terms to know. Okay, so let's cut out cherub, amulet. Okay, that's it for the first page, just 2, cherub and amulet. Moving on to The second page. We're going to cut out funerary and kuros. Going on to the third page, cut out necropolis. And now we only have what, 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have to cut out 2 more. So let's go back up to the top of the second page, Stele. Cross that off. I think that still leaves us 1 short, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we need to cut 1 more. And that'll get it down to 15, which is the goal I had to begin with. That's a reasonable number, of which only 5 of those will appear, of the remaining ones on the test. Okay, so let's cut out Cult of the Dead. Now, that doesn't mean that if you had a slide of the sarcophagus from the Etruscan culture, you would need to talk about in the meaning section of your essay questions. We're going to talk about what those are in just a couple minutes. You would then need to know what that word means, but you wouldn't have to define it or look at a definition and see, is it accurate? We'll get to how that is in a minute. Okay, let's just make sure that list is clear for everybody. It's 7 terms: cherub, amulet, stele, funerary, kuros, cult of the dead, and necropolis. Okay, so how might the list, there are 2 lists, things invented by ancient Egyptians, this is a heads up for everyone for study purposes, and things invented by ancient Romans, how would those appear? I wouldn't expect you to just verbatim list all 6 items on those lists. I might say in the true false section of the midterm, and so now let's segue into what the midterm itself looks like, and I will actually hold up a sample of it, not the exact test, obviously, or else you'd be able to tell what's on it before you even start studying, but a sample of what a midterm form looks like, and I will email you those, of course. This is for another class. Obviously, it's not going to give away anything. I wouldn't show it to you if it did, but it's the format that you'll get. When I send you a PDF, it will be the weekend before the test. Since it's on a Monday, it'll probably be a Saturday, or at the latest 24 hours before the test, the minimum one. It'll be a PDF. You are then responsible for downloading it. What do you do with the PDF? 1 or 2 things. So I'm going to say this slowly, and if anybody needs to repeat it, let me know. You can either write right on that if you print it out. You don't have to print it out, but if you choose to do it manually, that is answer the questions on the test, then you would do it right on the sheet. And that's what the sheet is going to look like if you print it out, or either way, whether you do it or not. Obviously, this is for 1.1, you get the idea. But I can safely show you this because otherwise you'd know what the true false questions are too far ahead of time to make it any kind of a test. So the first section is 5 slides. I'm sorry, I skipped too quickly over that. 5 slides from the syllabus that I didn't cut, where you identify them just exactly like you have on the syllabus, or that you see as they are listed. The exact spelling, yes, because it's an open book, open no test. I'm not going to give any flexibility on that. You should be able to spell the terms correctly if you found the slide correctly and you identify correctly. So you fill this in. Sorry, let me just hold this here for a moment or two. For 5 slides, you do the title, the artist or location, because these ancient slides, we don't know the artist of most of them. So it's usually location, meaning the country, right, or city. And the date, just like it is on the syllabus. There will be 5 of them. You will get 3 points for each fact you list correctly, or you enter, you write correctly. Okay. Each of those facts is worth 3 points. I think some of you already can do the math, depending on your math education. Simple math. I do it in my head, right? But you can use a calculator if you prefer. Okay. So 3 points for the title, the location or artist, and the date for each slide makes 3 facts times 3 is 9 facts, 9 points. I'm sorry, 9 points for each slide you get correct. There are 5 of them, and that is a total of 45 points. So this I cannot stress enough. Do not show up late. It won't be good for you because the test is not being recorded. I've said that before, but obviously otherwise it'd be pointless to have a deadline. The deadline is midnight for you to turn the test in. I'm going to talk about how you can turn the test in, how you can convert it and all that stuff into a PDF. I mean, not the technology, but the steps of the process, part of it in a couple minutes. But I just want to make sure you understand the first slide. I'll send you guys an email and remind you easily 2 days before the test. Well, during that weekend anyway, before the test, which will be just reminding you of what I'm telling you now. And so if there's a few, I know I can see from the enrollment, tonight's attendance, there's a few people not here. I started to say not with us. It sounds like they moved on to another level of life. I mean, not here now in attendance. They'll get to see the recording of this review, but there will be no recording of the test. It's not going to be recorded. It's all in real time, because otherwise the people in my in-person class have a disadvantage. So how do I even out the playing field? I give you guys even a little bit of an advantage because you might have a little time involved in converting your answers if you wrote them into a, what else could you do if you choose to write them? I mean, how can you get those to me? If you had, and please don't use cursive and don't use pencil. You'll get points off because it's hard to read either of those two. So they need to be black ink. And if you choose to write them right on the test sheet, there's plenty of room to do that for all of the questions on the test. Then you can just make a screenshot of each page. Just be careful you don't cut the margins off, because then I may not be able to see if you've completed one of your essay questions thoroughly or not. So make sure you've got the whole page in if you do it that way. Then take the screenshots, and I know you guys can do this better than me. Probably I'd have trouble doing it. Convert those images into a PDF and send it as a single document, of course, to me. And here's where you send it. I already wrote this out for a class I gave this afternoon. They were our 2.1. You guys are 1.1. You see how I modified it for this evening class. You write just very similar, you know, to what you just did with your papers. Our 1.1 midterm. Underline last name, comma, first name, and then send it as a PDF to me at markw@aol.com. Now you can send it to Outlook. I of course wouldn't say you can't, because that is the official website for the college, but I can tell you, you'll get a much quicker grade returned to you and more efficiently entered in my roll book if you send it to me at my Mark W. Why? I don't want to go into all that detail because that's, you don't need to know everything, but I can just summarize by saying Outlook, I know people that have used it in their offices and job situations. It's not an uncommon website, but it's so cumbersome. It takes much longer to delete things from it than it does from AOL or Yahoo or any of the others. I have AOL, obviously. And also, my spam filter is very good. I get very little spam. But on the Outlook, I get all kinds of stuff saying, you know, do you want to attend your high school in Berlin, New Hampshire reunion, class of 92? No, I've never been there. And obviously I graduated from high school a lot sooner than 92. And you have to delete all that crap, pardon my French, every day. So it's so cumbersome. So if you want me to enter your, download, enter, and then forward to my reader or myself, the text of your PDF and open it and grade it more rapidly, efficiently, so you get them back, your grades, at the same time as the others who were turned in together. There's no late option here. You either get the midterm by midnight, because that gives you what? We do the math. The test only takes an hour, but if you need the time, you can have all the way until midnight. So what you've got almost 3.5 more hours, actually, because the test itself will start at 6:45, and I'm going to send you an email to remind you, but now I'm really hitting that hard. I mean, don't log in at 6:50. You will have missed several of the first slide IDs. They're only going to be on the screen for 2 minutes, and I guarantee you, either you'll be able to recognize them quickly if you've done any studying, and you won't even need a minute for them, but I give you up to 2 minutes while the slide's on the screen to just identify them. That's more than enough time. And so that first 10 minutes, you got a 45 point. If you don't show up, you're 10 minutes or more than 10 minutes late, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. You can't get better than a D on the test. It's a passing grade, but who wants a lower grade than that or like that? I mean, so you want to make sure you're logging in by 6:40 would be good as the latest time. Now, are there exceptions? Life happens. Yes, I've already mentioned this about, late papers, but it applies to the real-time exam since it's not going to be recorded. If there's an emergency, the district has a policy. I adhere to it strictly, and it's very fair and balanced and easy to remember, which is if you have a medical or family emergency with some written evidence, again, not my rule, but it's required that you produce something I can see in writing to prove you were either sick, or medically incapacitated somehow during the day of that test of the midterm in this case, or a family emergency and you had to leave town, then there'd be some evidence that you weren't in the Bay Area when, the test was being given that day, that you might have airline tickets or, bridge toll or something to prove you had to travel, and a brief explanation, like, 2 lines would be enough to explain what's going on. Then I will have to do a one-on-one negotiation, and I usually check with the department chair, and that's just to be safe, as to what's a reasonable makeup. And you will have to do at least an equal amount of writing as a makeup, but that's only if you're physically unable to sit at your laptop on the day of the test, on the evening of the test, and only if you provide written evidence. Okay, so keep that in mind. So try just to be logged in no later than 6:40. So the first slide will be on the screen at 6:15. And already after the first 10 minutes, we will go on to the second section of the test. And so let me hold that up, because this is for Art 1.2, this actual midterm form. It's not giving anything away to show you the true false section, which will be different, of course, on the format you'll be getting, the PDF form, I should say, of the test for Art 1.1. So there'll be 5 definitions written out, or statements, let's say, based on those definitions you already have. And so you'll look at that statement, which tracks with the definitions that you have in your notes, the ones I didn't cut, and then see, is there anything about that statement that is not accurate, not correct? For instance, here's an example, concrete example. And I think at least one question like this will occur. I left the 2 lists. I was just saying the list of things invented by the ancient Egyptians and things invented by the ancient Romans. So I might say things invented by the ancient Romans included domes, concrete, and obelisks. Would that be true or false? Anybody? Should be obvious. It'd be false. They didn't invent obelisks, the Egyptians did. So, of course, that statement is false based on the definition of the Roman. So you're not going to be asked to recall those 6 things or even specific, list of anything. But I will have in the true false section statements based on that list, at least one, maybe not both, possibly both. The Egyptians list of Egyptian inventions, ancient Egyptian, of course, and the list of ancient things invented by ancient Romans. And if any one of them is not accurate, then the whole statement is false. It's pretty straightforward. Now, those are worth 2 points each. There are only 5 of them. So that's another 10 points. And then the third part, I'll hold it up again for this, is the part you'll spend the most time on, of course, and you get the most time, is the slide essay question. And that's what you do, where you do see the directions are right in front of you, but I always state them or, summarize them here now. And then any questions you have, please feel free. We'll take a pause before I summarize. The last thing is an optional extra credit. I'll get to that at the end of this overview I'm giving you now, which is that for this slide analysis section or slide short essays, what you're asked to do, if you want full points, and it says it right there, is first identify the slide, just the way they are in the syllabus, like you did up above on the first page. I mean, when you identified the first 5, but for those, you only get 1 point each. If you get each of the 3 facts correct, the date, the title, and the location or artist, you get 3 points. And then the remaining points are from 2 paragraphs. That's all you got to write. Now that qualifies as a short essay. Don't outline, don't use bullet points. That's not an essay. You get partial credit, but you'd be dropped at least a grade before even, or the readers start grading your short essays or slide analysis, because we want a short essay in full sentence form. And please keep the paragraphs separate. I already had a couple lay papers where readers were complaining and getting back to me saying, I can't grade this because, or it's difficult to grade because this person mixed up that's points off right there. Don't mix the formal analysis and the meaning on the slide essays. Here's all that you required. 6 sentences about formal elements, 1 on each of 6. You don't have to do all 9, in other words, like you did on your papers, of the elements that we've covered. Just the 6 you can see in that slide. So if I were you, I'd do that first, because you want to be looking at the slide when you do the formal elements. But of course, if you don't finish any one of these essays, once you've identified the slide, it's easy to go back anytime up until midnight before the deadline to turn it in and check your own notes, because I gave you more than 6 of the elements. I gave you all 9, I think, on every slide, every must-know slide. So in other words, all you have to do is write 6 of the formal elements, and you have to describe them. If you give me just a list, you'll get half credit. That's not going to get you very far. There's lots of dynamic lines here. Where? You got to be specific. I think all of you did that on your papers, at least on most of those elements. So you need to give me examples of each of those elements, okay? Only 6 will be required. Now, can you do more just to cover the bases in case you make a mistake on one, or you don't do a thorough job on one of the descriptions of those first 6 elements? Not a bad idea. If you have the time, maybe do 6 or 7, but you don't have to do all 9. So 6, maybe you choose to do 1 extra, possibly just to give you a cushion or margin for error. The second paragraph, if I were you, I'd do it second, is the meaning. And again, that's in your notes. Don't waste time. This is a really valuable tip I've learned over the years, to just cut to the chase. You don't have to use your textbook at all, either to study for the test or on the test, but you can have it near you if you want to refer to it for the images, if that helps you, right? The images of those must-know slides that came from Stockstead were very similar to the ones in Stockstead. But the point is that you can get 100% on the meaning part of each of 3, and there are 3 slide essays, from your notes. So all you really need is your notes, and maybe the textbook is a backup for the actual, referencing the images. But you don't need to go back and forth between the textbook. In fact, you shouldn't. That could cause confusion, because all I'm going to look for on a master that I will give to the readers, and that I myself, of course, will create from one of your perfect, and there will be at least 1 or 2, maybe more perfect exams where everyone gets, those people, those who do a perfect paper, means they get full credit, all the points possible. That creates, a template for grading the rest. They will, of course, all be facts taken from the notes I gave you in the meaning section for each of those slides. So you don't even need to reference the textbook for the slide essay answers. There are 3 of them, and you can do the math, but I'll do it for you. It wasn't specific when I said, the first 3 points are from identifying on the top line each of these 3 slide essays, which slides they are. And then 2 paragraphs, 6 facts about the meaning, and 6 of the formal elements, 6 points each for each one you get right. 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 3 is 15. There are 3 slide essay questions. That's it. 3 short essays. You can write right on here. There's plenty of room. Now you could choose also to create an electronic, and actually it's easier for me and the readers to grade. So I kind of hope the majority of you, but it's your choice, will actually answer the questions, typing them in on your laptop or whatever, your computer, into a digital format. And then of course that has to be sent to me, as I just said, as a PDF before midnight on the day of the test. Anyway, so you can do the math of 3, right? 3 of these questions, the slide essay questions, and the total is worth 15 points. If you get them all correct, times 3 is 45. So there's your 100 points. First part, the slide analysis, slide identification, of the first 5 slides at the beginning of the test, right? There's 45 points, then 10 more for the true false, and then another 45 for the slide essays. There's your 100 points. But wait, there's more, as they used to say. But let me pause and see, does anybody have any questions at this point about anything we just covered in terms of how the test is going to be given?
I
Anybody?
have a question.
Sure.
Oh, I'll show my face. Hi.
Go ahead.
Dark, sorry. I was gonna ask, so for the essay part where you were saying, you suggested we do the social analysis first, which makes sense because we'll be looking, so will you be showing us the slides again or different slides for that portion? during the
Oh, no,
midterm?
there'll be 3 different slides. Okay, I think I understand your question. The total number of slides you're going to see during the entire test in real time is 8 total. And they're
Oh, okay.
and so in other words, I know it's an important question, so it's a good thing you ask. So what that means is the first 5 will be just your identifying, like they are in a syllabus, nothing else. Don't waste time writing anything more than what's on the syllabus. Then you have 10 minutes to do the true false. And some of you will probably have done them before the class starts, or you can wait till after the slide are done, because you'll have till midnight to check how those terms match or jive with the definitions I gave you. So that's 10 minutes. And then you have, those slides will be on for 15 minutes each. And that's the 3, they're different from the ones for sure, not overlapping or the same as any of the first 5 that were on the slide ID. It'll be 3 other slides, like one of the most important ones might be, the Sphinx or something, where you identify it and then you talk about the meaning and the formal elements. So there's no overlapping, if that's what I think I understand. So it's
Yes,
total of
great.
8
Thank
slides.
you.
Sure. Absolutely important to clarify. That's what we're here for. So anybody else have any other kind of, and it helps your fellow students, of course, to do this kind of question and answer session. That's why I don't like teaching, and I know asynchronous is popular. I understand why. You could sit in your pajamas or whatever you might want to, do and relaxing, setting, and watch it whenever you feel like. But you know what? It's harder to keep up with everything that way. I know my daughter's taking several classes at Santa Rosa JC online, has in the last 2 semesters they were all asynchronous. It doesn't mean there's a superior kind of quality maybe to the lectures themselves or the material, the information. But I think it's better to actually have, thank you for that question. In other words, for the sake of other students and yourselves, to have live interactions to get answers to things, as well as maybe hear things that aren't just written down on a syllabus or in a textbook from the actual instructor. But anyway, so now any other questions about how the test itself is structured? And of course, it's your choice if you want to write the answers in, remember, please print neatly as you can in dark ink, preferably black. Sometimes blue is hard, doesn't show up as well when it gets transmitted by PDF. So preferably black ink. And then that would be, what else would you do with that except create it as to create a PDF, you would convert it from screenshots into a PDF. And then of course, the other choice is just the straightforward answering the questions in digital format. And then if it's not already a PDF, because I'm sending it to you as a PDF, make sure you've converted it. But you got, like I said, what is it, over 4 hours so the last slide will be off the screen. Oh, I didn't say extra credit. Sorry. It's an optional slide that will not involve any facts, any analysis, formal or otherwise. And it's not from the syllabus. It'll be a slide I took of a real, I'll go ahead and give you a kind of a clue as to what kind of slide. It'll be from a museum, very famous museum, city where I grew up, one of the greatest museums in the United States. And if you've never been to Chicago, you wouldn't know it. The Art Institute of Chicago. It's one of the world's great museums, absolutely no debating that. And it'll be something interesting that I saw a picture, and took a picture of a high quality digital image, and then decided that it gives you some kind of a scenario. And I will tell you what actually is the event that, or meaning behind that display, that object at that museum. I'll give you the facts. So you could just transpose the facts into 5 sentences for 5 points extra credit, but most of you won't be that lazy, and you'll use your imagination and create a story. 5 or more sentences, that's all you need to get 5 points. It's optional, but I've seen it happens, never fails every semester. A handful of students miss an A in the class or even a B by less than 5 points, or 5 or less, because they didn't do one or both of the extra credit optional slides at the end of there'll be one also on the final. So that's an extra 5 points. So some of you get 105, 102, 104, 5 points if you do the extra credit optional. That slide will also be on the screen for 15 minutes. Not that you'll need that long. So then I will log off and remind you before I, sign off that night. We're talking about the test. I think everybody knows I said it last week, but just to recap, what day the test is going to be given, of course, it's on your syllabus, is 2 weeks from today. It's the 28th, isn't it? Yes, the 28th. Okay. And then we do have new slides, because look how much we have to cover the second half. We've got all these world cultures. They're fascinating. Japanese, Chinese, Indian, and Mesoamerican slides, as well as some others that are, from the latter eras, like including, of course, Van Gogh is included in the post or impressionist, post-impressionist. We go all the way up through the early 20th century. So since we have so much to cover, I'm not, sometimes I just give the test and that's it. But when we finish with that last slide, I'll probably just leave the extra credit on for 10 minutes, because it's not going to take you that long. And then we'll take a break. And then we will resume with slides that could be on the final. And then the final is not cumulative, but the very next set of slides will be on early Christian and Byzantine art. And that will be March 28th. Oh, I have a typo. I caught it here. There's no class on the 21st, of course. We have a 10-day spring break. I hope you guys enjoy it. Okay. So I should have, do you want to do this now? Let's do it together. My bad. Okay. I mean, you would have already caught that. Of course, I don't expect anyone to think about a lecture on the 21st. You're on vacation. It's the 28th. On the 28th, the test is for the first half. Then we take a break, and then we'll probably only have an hour for the second part of the class to cover early Christian art. All right. So I've covered everything that I can think of. Let me think if there's anything else. I did hold up, right? I know I did. Yes, of course I did this. One more time, I'll do it just as an extra helpful reminder. And I will send you guys an email along with the attachment of the PDF of the test itself for you to download before the test. Probably like Sunday morning or early afternoon. So it's well over 24 hours before the test, since it's not until 6:45, but don't log in that late. You want to be ready and prepared with your notes in front of you and, centered. It's called when you go in for, my dad was an actor. Quick aside. Should I offer extra credit? No, this is too. My dad was in a film called Black Sheep with Chris Farley and Spade. I forget his name now. His first name. That's terrible. They were top-notch actors on Saturday Night Live in the 90s. Yeah, that far back. And my dad was already in several short little cameo roles on TV shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch. He played Mark Twain in a walk-on and that. So he was, getting a little recognition, and he was just doing it as a sideline. He was actually full-time portraying Thomas Edison to school kids. We're talking about grade school through middle school in science classes and lectures and in whole big auditoriums. That's how he made his living the last 20 years of life. But he did this acting in several Hollywood movies. It's called Black Sheep. It's available. It's all over the place in both DVD and on, I think it's on Amazon. Anyway, so it just, he called it centering, and that's the phrase, he didn't make that up, that actors would use when they're getting ready to go on to the stage to audition. It's like, you got one shot, do or die. They like you or they hate you. You get the part, maybe you don't know right away, but if you didn't, because they tell you right there how, thank you, please stop, no more, So that's a very stressful moment. I don't think you have that. Well, maybe some of you will feel that much stress, but let's hope you just are calmer than that and are able to just be centered before 6:45. So try to log on by 6:40. That's what I'm saying. Well, I think I've covered everything that I intended to. I have in terms of how the test is going to be given and how it's going to be graded, what to expect, and what slides not or terms not to waste time studying. Okay, so now it's sort of becoming an early finishing, but I'm going to stick around as long as there are any questions. And now it's open to questions from anyone about anything, including extra credit or late papers or anything else relating to the test itself. Anybody have any other questions that you have about anything? Now's a chance to ask. These are my office hours, obviously. Okay, well, you guys, thank you for, the questions that you did ask, I think have helped your fellow students. Now, this will be posted if you care to look at it again. You shouldn't need to, for those who weren't here tonight, on YouTube by, like I said, usually by 8 p.m. Friday. Oh, I didn't say I was I did say I was sick. Of course I did, but that's why I didn't post before. I didn't say that. Usually I don't miss that deadline before the weekend. So that'll be out there for you to look at if you need to, because it is 2 weeks. You might forget some of the things that we just discussed. If you, aren't focused during, why would you be during spring break? All you guys have a great time. Relax, do something fun. Don't even have to think about. But then probably on the Sunday before the test, if not sooner, you will want to do some review and some study with your own notes and be more prepared, hopefully. But again, you can keep your notes and any book you want next to you during the exam, and you'll have till midnight to turn it in. So I think that gives you plenty of flexibility and a much easier opportunity than you would have had if you were in one of my in-person classes before the shutdown. It would have all been closed book, no notes, and you'd have to turn the test in at the end of the first half before the break. Unless you had special arrangement, and then I had a separate room where you could finish up for time and a half. But you all have that as a given, so I don't need to make a special arrangement for the test, because if you need it, you got till midnight. That's like 4 times what the length of the test itself is, which is meant for 1 hour. Okay, we've covered a lot. Anybody else? I know there's only a couple more people. Did I see? Yeah, I did. One student who had a late paper, but I think that was, he's already signed off, and I think that was from the other class that several people are taking 2 classes from me this semester. So does anybody, that's 2 of you guys left, Joe or Sam, have a question of any kind about anything we covered or anything else relating to extra credit or any other general questions before we sign off? Last call. Nobody? All right, of course, you can email me in the time between now and the test, but don't wait till the Sunday before the test. If you have an important question relating to anything, not just the test itself, I can get back to you within 48 hours if it's on the weekend, or 24 if it's on a weekday. Okay, that's it. Anybody? Last call. All right, you guys, have a great spring break, right? And relax, and then I'll see you all 2 weeks from tonight. Okay, good night.